Deputy Associate Dean at the University of Melbourne, Pradeep Taneja, says it's going to be a huge logistic exercise.
From the Himalayan mountains in the north in Jammu and Kashmir and in Himachal Pradesh to the deserts of Rajasthan in the west and the remote islands of Andaman and Nicobar. It's a massive exercise. There's more than 650,000 villages in India, and the enumerators have to be able to reach those villages and collect the data from, as you said, more than 1.4 billion people. So it's a challenge. But India has been pretty good at doing this sort of thing. For example, with the elections, conducting elections in a vast country like India is a very similar exercise. So it's been done before, and I'm sure this time the challenge is going to be slightly, I think, more difficult because they're collecting this data digitally.
It's interesting. I was reading through some of the questions that will be asked in the survey, and it relates to internet access, it relates to how many married couples are living under one roof, whether that particular roof is thatched or concrete. But there is also a very intriguing question about caste as well. Why would that be important information in modern India?
Well, the census is being conducted in two phases. The first phase has already begun this year. The second phase would be next year. In the first phase, the census is collecting data about people's housing conditions. In other words, what sort of dwelling you live in, what sort of material it's being built with, and all that I think is going to give government data about living conditions for the people. And in other words, it would tell the government what more needs to be done. So I think that sort of data is important. Regarding the castes, the inclusion of caste in the census, as you said, this is the first time since 1931, since the colonial days, that this data is being collected. And in the past, particularly after independence, the governments were reluctant to include caste in the census because, this was a newly independent post-colonial government trying to build a progressive nation state. And they felt that including caste in the census would further harden social divisions and hierarchy. In fact, the demand for inclusion of caste in the census has been coming from the people from the lower caste themselves, because they want to be counted accurately, because India has extensive welfare schemes for people from lower caste and lower economic strata. And those people want to make sure that they get appropriate representation in parliament, for example, in the legislative assemblies in the state, but also in government job reservations, because India reserves a certain percentage of jobs, a fairly high percentage of jobs, for people from lower castes. And they want to make sure that the government is aware what their exact sort of extent of the lower caste population is in the country.
Certainly very intriguing that. Now, I do wonder whether this information that will be gleaned from the count will have a political impact, let's just say, in Parliament or perhaps along political maps.
Oh, certainly, because the data that comes out of the census is likely to demonstrate that the percentage of population belonging to various castes, lower castes in particular, is much higher than has been extrapolated from the 1931 census. And therefore, with a higher percentage in the population, the lower caste people are going to demand higher reservations, more seats in parliament, more seats in the legislative assemblies.